if I know them well. And yeah, Devin Navara, now after these couple of victories, I mean, his confidence is going to be higher than anyone else in the world. Beating Magnus Carlsen and then winning that fantastic endgame we saw in the last round. Meanwhile, wow, is this one of the first times we've seen this throughout the Champions Chess Tour last season and this season? It's the Dutch defence.
And Simon is not here to enjoy this moment.
I know, and not only is it the Dutch defence, it's also Simon's favourite variation of the Dutch. Yeah, the classical Dutch, just pushing this pawn forward. We rarely see this at the, at the top level. And now Richard Rapport, is he going to bring his bishop out? Wow, why isn't Simon here? Shout out to Ginger GM if you're watching, because Simon is one of the connoisseurs of this opening, one of the pioneers as well, just showing how attacks can be made. Simon has beaten players like Gelfand, Wojciech in this opening. And, OK, computers hate it for black, we should specify, so let's ignore the evaluation bar for the first 10, 15 moves of this game. But meanwhile, black is the first one to castle. White occupies most of the centre, and now white needs to catch up with piece development. And, OK, not what Simon likes to see. It's kind of transposed away from Simon's favourite classical Dutch to what we call the stone wall. If you look at the black pawn structure, in the centre of the board, all of the pawns are on light squares. It's like a wall, just blocking white's pieces out. And black is just going to fight on those light squares for survival. The dark squares are a bit weak for black. That's why this opening doesn't have such a good reputation, maybe, historically. But then again, black is rock solid, thanks to this stone wall setup.
All right. Yeah. And it is a very solid setup. And I did ask for everyone to send in their thoughts, suggestions, and their selfies. I do have to show you two selfies. One from Mariana Lopez, who is watching with her cat. And she says, cat is very interested. Yeah. We like it.
And maybe it's Charlie, the chess cat.
Yeah, this. Or a little rival, you know. It doesn't want to be the only chess cat. And meanwhile, white has moved his rook. And someone else watching the show, a big shout out to CJ Demoy. He used to be the president of the English Chess Federation. And he says that he's supposed to be studying. Stop distracting me. Well, sorry, but not really sorry. You can multitask.
Hey, CJ.
Yeah. And definitely, if you too want to send us your questions, your thoughts, and even your selfies, there's still time. You can do that by tweeting us using the hashtag #ChessChamps.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, and meanwhile, a couple of moves, but not too much has changed. David Navara has just shuffled the white rook on the queen side across one square. He's aiming to push white's b-pawn forward. He's trying to open lines on this left side of the board, but Rapport is trying to stop that from happening. And it's just a very cagey battle right now. Richard Rapport needs to decide how to improve his pieces. Another reason this opening, the Stonewall Dutch, doesn't have such a great reputation is because black's light-squared bishop tends to get locked in behind its own pawns. So often the black light-squared bishop, I was about to say, has it just moved? No, it hasn't. The knight moves instead. That bishop is the problem child. It needs to somehow wiggle its way out over to the king side and somehow trade itself off because black does have one bad piece, and often a bad piece makes your whole position bad. Meanwhile, though, Rapport just brings his knight out instead. I'm not such a fan of that, I must admit. But, OK, at least black, for the time being, still rock solid.
Yeah, definitely rock solid, but I agree with you. This doesn't fit the rules of the Stonewall, because the normal Stonewall thing that I see is that, like you mentioned, the light square bishop goes on an odyssey and kind of does a little zigzagging movement along the back row and gets all the way to the right side. Or, alternatively, but this is a lot more riskier, is actually to try to get her out via the left side of the board. By doing this, Rapport is just saying, hey, I'm going to leave the bishop behind and I'm going to focus on putting the knight in the middle of the board. And, well... It's never too late to admit that you made a mistake. Those are one of the mountain rules in Norway that I found out.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. I just want to mention, you guys, look at the donation bar. We have made it to 49 50,000 in our fundraiser for UNICEF. Come on, let's make it to 50,000 by the end of day 2. That would be fantastic. And you can donate if we get up the QR code. You can scan that with your phone or you head to chess24.com/donate. Come on, let's make it to 50,000 by the end of today. That would be a fantastic number to help the people of Ukraine.
Yeah. How much is needed? It's like we're 49,000 and...
It's like $900 away. Are we?
There we go. Yeah, just over $900.
$900 away, okay.
Under, sorry.
Yeah.
And, okay, meanwhile, yeah, still no moves. As you mentioned, Richard Rapport lost a bit of time over the last couple of turns, just bringing his knight forward and then having to retreat it to its start square. David Navara, though, as we're used to from him, maybe just trying to work out what to do, just scratching his head there. White ideally wants to start pushing forward. Black's pieces are very, very passive, but it's not easy to do that. White can't break forward in the center yet. White can't open lines there because Black's pawns are just blunting any potential pawn breaks, pawn pushes, and therefore, okay, he just lifts his queen up the board. That's a good move. I was going to say, I'm hoping he didn't retreat the white knight on the kingside back to where he came from, because that would have actually repeated the position for the second time. And just to show some ideas and just to show what has been happening over the last few turns, because some viewers at home might be wondering, why did Black bring the knight out to the square and then retreat it to its home? Because after White's knight jump, attacking this weak pawn, another problem child in the stone wall structure, Black's knight had to move out the way. If Black's knight jumped forward, indirectly now defending this pawn, then suddenly, whoops, this knight gets trapped. The pawn would step forward. This knight now has no safe squares to go to. If it leaps forward again, then it does get caught by this white pawn. And that meant that after the knight did jump forward, the black knight had to jump back where it came from, again, utilizing this bishop to defend the weak pawn. And after the queen steps forward, Black has pushed his pawn forward, and now, finally, the black knight is let out of its cage again. But White has definitely gained something here. White has gained a really useful queen move, a nice square in the center of the board, guarding this pawn as well. Black, meanwhile, has weakened himself slightly on this flank. And look at this, Navara, he's full of confidence right now because he's just thrown his pawn forward, and after a trade, he's trying to push forward even further to undermine Black's structure. We talked about the stone wall. It's basically this structure, this wall of pawns on the light squares, and White wants to erode that wall. But Black does have some say in the matter, and he's using his knight now to target this pawn, trying to force White to make a commitment. If White pushes forward, maybe the black knight is going to creep into the enemy half. And actually, it's a real thorn in White's side here, this knight, supported on an outpost by its pawn.
Yeah, but you know me, it's like waving a little red flag. You know, you want me to push the pawn? I'll do it with pleasure. Absolutely.
It's so nice that you guys have different styles in that sense. So we get both styles.
but my style definitely does have its disadvantage. Maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic at times. But here I was just going to say my big plan is, as David highlighted, is to push the other pawn one square forward. And my one philosophy in life is that if your opponent puts a piece in your side of the board, you should be really possessive about your own side. You'll be like, haha, this is mine. Either you chase it away or you try to swap it off. If it's super annoying, swap that piece off.
Yeah, so for example, in that line, as you mentioned, Ivanka, if White's pawn steps forward, if the black knight does enter the first 4 ranks, just swap it off for your own knight. Just don't let it sit there too long, otherwise it will cause some damage. And yeah, why not? Throw the C pawn forward, throw the B pawn forward. I know you advocate pushing pawns, and sometimes I disagree, Ivanka, but here, I fully support that that philosophy. Throw those pawns forward, because what else for White, simply?
I have a nickname for this type of pawn structure.
Okay.
I call it, no one else in the world calls it this, by the way.
They will after now.
Well, I call it the big clamp.
Okay.
I call it the big clamp because, you know, and it hasn't happened. Oh, boo. It's sad about that, actually. But the whole idea is just simply you just clamp down on the space, and when you kind of control Black's potential pawn push, that's it.
I saw you said big clamp first.
Big clamp.
Yeah, I was imagining a clam.
A clam?
Yeah.
Like that character from Futurama. I don't know what his name is, Dr.
Yeah.
I don't know, sorry.
The
Zorb or
seafood
something,
clam,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
A shellfish? No.
It's kind of a shellfish,
Zorb,
yeah.
okay.
And
Zorb
it's
or something, yeah.
delicious. Yes, I had clams the other day, actually.
Stop it, making us hungry. And meanwhile, a couple of moves, so not the big clamp clamping down on the position, locking things up. Navara instead brought the white knight to the center, and following the other rule that we mentioned, as soon as a piece jumps into your half, try and evict it. Black has done the same. So white's knight jumped into black's first 4 ranks, and black's knight has retreated to try and trade off and try and evict that white knight in the middle. White's knight in the center of the board there, just too strong. So, okay, Devon Navara has an issue to deal with. What's he going to do? Still, does he want to allow a knight trade? No, because black is the one cramped this time. Black is lacking space, and any exchanges that occur will favor Richard Rapport. So I'm very surprised Devon Navara went into this rather than your option, Jovanka, because here a set of knights is definitely about to get traded off. Or is it Devon Navara now going on the attack? And he, with his white knight, is attacking a black bishop, attacking black's rook at the top of the board. He's really trying to fight for territory here, but he has sacrificed a pawn. And Richard Rapport grabbed that pawn instantly. White's queen now under fire. White's queen has to move.
Yeah.
Is she just going to shuffle one square to the side, maybe attack some weak pawns? Is she going to retreat? Either way, Devon Navara taking big, big risks. Yeah,
I think that knight move wasn't really great, like you suggested. And now I just think that Richard's kind of gotten away with it. And I think Richard is absolutely fine, although he has to be careful. He has to be careful because if David were to step back with the queen along the diagonal, then maybe there might be some options of just exploding open the center and just releasing the power of the light squared bishop.
Yeah, so for example, okay, he hasn't done this, but I was going to say, now there is this double attack. The rook is the more valuable piece, so the rook has to move. And for example, after a trade here, white could explode things open, push pawns forward. And after a trade here, for example, okay, white can take with the bishop, with the knight, but white does have the power of the bishop pair. These bishops now facing down on some diagonals towards the black king. But if we catch up with the game, this didn't happen. White slid across with his queen, blocking his own pawns, but eyeing up this weakness in the center. And a couple of moves later, the rook moved. We saw a trade, knight for bishop. So white has the bishop pair, but it's all about opening lines up for that bishop. And with this pawn push, he's trying to undermine black's structure. He's trying to open up this diagonal for white's fianchettoed bishop. And to me, it still looks like white has great compensation. White's down a pawn, but his piece is just superior. And black, meanwhile, on the defensive, bring his queen forward, indirectly defending this pawn as well. And Richard Rapport, I've seen him on the white side of these positions plenty of times. I'm not so sure he's going to be happy. Look at the dark squares as well. Black's been shorn of a dark square bishop, and therefore his dark squares are going to be weak. If this guy enters the action, for example, if the white queen was somehow to get out the way safely, I'm not sure you want to do this yet, but the bishop could join the action with devastating effect later on. And okay, Devon Navara needs to find a way to open up his bishops. He'd love to open up this diagonal, but he'd also love to find a good home for this piece. Meanwhile, if you compare pieces, this is definitely the worst piece on the board. This is another reason why the evaluation bar likes white right now. This bishop blocked in, not contributing to the battle at all.
Yeah, I agree there is a lot of danger, but I have to say, it does seem to be a trademark of Richard to grab a pawn and then like survive and just bank on the fact that his opponent doesn't have so much time to find the most precise way to nurture home that advantage.
Wow, yeah, look at the clock times.
Yeah, I mean, just under 8 minutes, and Richard, he's got more time than when he started.
Yeah, Richard, I mean, he's made some huge decisions, really committal decisions, grabbing a pawn, allowing some trades, putting his pieces on weird squares, but he's made those decisions instantly, and maybe the clock will be a big factor later in the game. And Richard, in the last game, we saw him we saw him give up a few pawns against Magnus Carlsen. That didn't work for him, so maybe he's being materialistic here. Wow, he did it again, Richard Rapport. He made a move without moving his hands, just levitating those pieces. He's using his mouth to make those pre-moves. He was predicting what Navara was going to do, and he automatically recaptured the pawn, even though his hands were by his face. So really impressive stuff. And okay, the white queen dropping back. This sets up the idea we actually mentioned a few minutes ago. White's central pawn, the e-pawn, is going to shoot up the board 2 squares. The position will end up opening. And who's that going to favour? That's the question. I think it's going to favour the bishops. But Rapport does have a move before that happens, before white is able to throw his pawns forward in the centre. And there we go. He does fight against this by offering a trade of knights.
And there the explosion starts. Well, white activates the forces, and suddenly it's such an incredibly sharp position. And like you said, it's all about whether black will survive the onslaught. And it's very, very weak on the light squares. And you pointed out quite a few times, but it's so true. Black's light square bishop.
So bad.
So bad.
And look at Black's pawn structure. And until that pawn was captured, he had 2 sets of isolated doubled pawns. And, OK, still Black temporarily a pawn up, but it's all about that Black bishop not really entering the action. And I think Richard really needs to slow down over the next few moves before it's too late. He's trusted his instincts up to this point, but he's got a really difficult position. And having 15 minutes on the clock, you don't take that to tomorrow, you don't take that to the next game. So you might as well pause now. It's a really critical moment, because if White's dark squared bishop enters and joins the fun, then the 2 bishops together, I think, for White are going to win this game for Navara. And, OK, what to do? Maybe Black's bishop can come out. It has to at some point.
Yeah, definitely has to. And, well, the players are certainly keeping us entertained. And everyone at home is also following the action and keeping us entertained. And I have a few selfies to show you. And Naval Badri says that they're staying late night because, of course, it's quite late in Asia. And, OK, well, Richard retreating the rook, keeping it near to the king. And Little Oval is saying difficult choices to either study or to watch the chess. Watch the chess, or you can do both. I'm a big fan of multitasking. Yeah. And Heidi M. Jawa says Sundays cannot get any better. So thank you very much for your selfies.
Definitely.
I love seeing them.
Sending you strength in studying. Oh, I remember those times.
Yeah, and just a bizarre move there by Devin Navara, because I think he was doing really well. And there we go, the evaluation bar shifts, and it's because of an obvious move. He's allowed Black's bishop out, and look at Black's bishop. Suddenly it's hitting one of the white rooks, and there was a queen trade there. Temporarily, White is a pawn up. But I think here it's just too materialistic. I think he should have just maintained the tension, got his pieces out, kept the queens on, most importantly, because Black's king was potentially weak. Now, after this queen trade, I think Navara has lost a lot of his advantage, and with correct play, it feels like Rapport is out of the woods. Black's bishop can go and take a rook right now. What is his idea?
I think he just wants to play the position a pawn up is what I wanted to say. So he's, bishop takes rook, both sides happy.
Yeah, we have to show what happened there, because it happened super quickly. Both players rushing, blitzing into that variation. And it was here I thought, OK, White's rook, as we are about to see in the game, is actually vulnerable on a light square. Why not just shift it across one square? You have targets as well on this line later. But instead of keeping the tension, Navara, got greedy, grabbing a pawn. And after the bishop moved, he grabbed another pawn. But after this queen trade, look at this. This bishop, which was just a block of wood, which wasn't really doing anything, joining the action, suddenly it can take this pawn. Or if Rapport wants to be super clever, this rook is under fire. Why not move it? Just shuffle it across. And suddenly this rook is attacked for White. This rook is also attacked for White. You have a problem, because if you suddenly trade a set of rooks, Black is suddenly winning after knight takes rook, recapturing, and it's a double attack. This knight hits this white bishop, and this bishop hits this white rook. And I think we might see a reaction from Navara. I think he's missed this really sneaky rook move by Rapport. He is a pawn up White now, but he's not going to keep this pawn for too long, because both of his rooks are under fire. And OK, he jumps out with his bishop, attacking this black rook now, but what's going to happen after bishop takes rook? This is, I mean, it's so many captures on every turn.
Still the same problem, David, isn't it?
It's the same problem. And this rook now under fire for White. If you take Black's rook, whoops, suddenly the white bishop is hanging. And I recommend anyone at home who is unsure about all of these complications, all of these captures, to go and play this out on Chess24. But it's really complicated right now. And the players have played quickly. But after the bishop jumped out, we saw a sacrifice from Navara. Bishop takes rook. He has simply recaptured. And now another sacrifice. Look at all these trades. Everything's getting hoovered off the board. This rook is attacked. This knight is also attacked. White's bishops are just too strong together. So why not get rid of one of them? Black gave up his extra rook for a bishop. And now after the knight moves, let's count. It's 4 against Black's 3. But these white pawns are all isolated or doubled. And I think this game is fizzling out towards a draw. Black can simply attack all of these pawns with his rook, maybe even with his knight. And yeah, the white pawn's just too weak. 1 pawn advantage, meaningless here. Navara has let his advantage slip.
In fact, I would even prefer to play black.
Same.
Just because look at the pawn structure. I mean, it's horrendous.
Yeah.
It's like
ugly.
It's like a weird zigzag that's gone wrong. Sorry.
You're right there. And okay, black's king is joining the action. Why not attack these pawns with your king? Maybe the king going on a march towards the white weaknesses. And yeah, I think Navara would love a draw right now, and he's going for that draw. Let's go back to the players. He's just hoovering everything off the board. Look at this. It's 3 versus 2 now, but those 3 white pawns just too weak. This game is going to end in a few moments. There's just not enough material left. Even if black wins one of the pawns back, there's no way to create a passed pawn, and therefore this rook endgame is a simple draw. And okay, I don't think we'll see a trade here from Navara. There we go. Trading the rooks would have been risky for white because white's pawns are separated, isolated. Black's pawns are joined and connected. And here we go. We're about to see a result. The position repeats itself. That's a perpetual check, 3-time repetition, and it's a draw. They end the day on a high.
And a smile from David Navara. He had a fantastic day today, winning 2 games and 2 draws. Also a draw here against world number 10, Richard Rapport.